Welcome to the MLB Network Podcast, presented by New Balance. We got now. I'm Matt Vasgersian, and I am personally thrilled to welcome our guest onto this episode of the podcast. Not only one of my all-time favorite players, but really, truthfully, one of the greatest players to play in the last 100 years of the sport. A partial list of the resume, and see if you can guess who we're talking about here. An All-Star 10 times. Twice All-Star Game MVP, 4 Gold Gloves, 1974 National League MVP, twice an NLCS MVP. He's won the Clemente Award. His consecutive game streak still stands as a National League record, although it's been a while since he was on the field himself. It's our pleasure to welcome Steve Garvey onto the podcast today. Steve, great to see you.
Great to see you. Keep going.
I would. I could. I mean, honestly,
I have to hire you to introduce me when I speak.
You know, the back of the baseball card is ridiculous. And the only thing missing here, and look, I've been on this soapbox a number of times over the past number of years, is Hall of Famer. Does that enter into your day ever? Do you ever think about the Hall of Fame knowing that you should absolutely be in Cooperstown?
You know, it's a great question. And, over the years, people keep asking me, and it continues to build because people go, why aren't you in? And I said, well, we went from 15 years with the writers to, gosh, how many now with the Veterans Committee? And I just don't know. I've got this wonderful, blessed body of work. And I think that's what you have to consider. It's not 500 home runs or 3,000 hits, but it's almost 20 years of doing the, like you just talked about, from World Series to All-Star games to playoffs to Gold Gloves to consecutive games that I'm very, very proud of. But I don't wake up worried about it. My career, I think, is one that people have noted. I always said we're in the memory business, and the most important thing for me is I've created a lot of memories for people, not only domestically, but around the world.
I'm in that group for sure. I'm in that group for sure, Steve. I mean, there are great players from your days, from your vintage, Lou Whitaker, Dale Murphy, like I could go on and on, who for whatever reason kind of slipped through the cracks in the voting process, which back then was a lot different than it is now. And my biggest beef with this is that for a player like yourself, you've got to wait for these Veterans Committee ballots to come around, and then you find yourself on a group in a list with 8 other very deserving players, and it's got to be a point of frustration for those of us like me who support you.
Well, thanks so much. Guys like, Bob Costas and Al Michaels and Claire Smith and people who are in the Hall of Fame, who I respect tremendously, are constantly carrying the torch for me, and I thank them and bless them, along with, many other people like yourself. So the ink's dry, so to speak, God willing, the next time. But I think they, for the sake of the Hall of Fame, have to change it because, I may have the record for most times on the ballot. I'm not sure I want to have that record, but it'll happen. I'm going to stay alive until I get on. So, I'm on the Irish Hall of Fame in Michigan State and Florida and California, which I take a little pride in.
There we go, for sure, and in the Dodgers Hall of Fame as well. And sure. I want to start the conversation here in earnest with you and the impact you made on that team. I want to talk about the celebrity component of your career in a moment, but first the infield. And, for fans like me who remember those 70s, early 80s teams so fondly with Lopes, Say, Russell, Yeager, to some degree, yourself, how is this group not the subject of a book that's been turned into a movie by now, Steve?
Yeah. Arguably the greatest infield in history. When you start to look at the components of it, 4 guys from Tacoma, Providence, Tampa, Broken Arrow come together. And I was the last piece. I was a wild arm third baseman. I first came out shoulder separation playing football at Michigan State to June 23rd of 1973 when I was actually leading the National League in pinch hitting. Walt Olson had me coming in, and I was a guy without a position. Say was there, obviously All-Star. And I get a hit in the first game against Cincinnati, and we're in between games, I'm sitting there, and he walks by, he stops, "Do you ever play first?" I said, "Oh, sure." I played 1 inning in Little League and 1 game in AAA, but I wasn't going to say no. And he puts me at third that night, and the first play, I dig one out of the dirt, get up to bat 2 innings and drive in 2 runs, and I have a 2 for 4 night with 4 RBIs, and after the game, I'm sitting there and he walks by and he doesn't stop. And I hear, "You're in there tomorrow." And I look at Steve Yeager and I said, "You or me?" Steve, he goes, "Garvey, I think it's you." And that began 15 years as Steve Garvey, as people know me, as the first baseman. And I do a lot of speaking, and I talk about this, and I say there are a lot of times in life where that moment when someone says to you, your boss, your owner, "Can you do this?" And you say, "Sure, give me a chance to do this." And that I said yes and put this great career together it was almost a carpe diem moment. Seize the moment, try it. It may be what you're destined for.
There's so much baseball that I want to go through with you, Steve, and we'll get to that here for sure. But I want to ask you about one element of your Dodgers playing career that had to have been an experience like none of us could ever identify with, and that's the idea of being a celebrity athlete in quote-unquote Hollywood at a time before TMZ, before cell phones, before social media, the experiences you must have had. How would you best summarize those years off the field for you in terms of the fun and the privilege of being a celebrity athlete there?
Well, I always look back and, I thank God for the opportunity to give me the skills to play the great game of baseball. I think there's all a certain destiny in it. I mean, yours has been a wonderful career. But as it started to evolve, on September 1st of 1969, four of us were called up from the minors. It was Bobby Valentine, Tom Paciorek, Billy Buckner, and I. And that day I got my first at bat. I got to the starting line. And remember, I was that little bat boy for 5 or 6 years in spring training for the Dodgers and then the LA Dodgers. And then to go through a testing period for about 3 years and then to find myself at first base. And then the team coming together and being at the top of baseball. But it was a time of guys with character, a time when you wanted to play every inning of every game, a time when, from Walt Alston giving the torch to Tommy Lasorda, two different styles of managing, but two guys that are in the Hall of Fame. By the way, the third one was Dick Williams when I was with San Diego. So 3 Hall of Fame managers. And then playing in LA, the entertainment capital of the world. And ultimately playing the World Series with the Yankees, which to me, and you talk about ultimate, that was it. Bi-coastal, 2 boroughs, 77, 78, great World Series. I think we lost 2, but I thought the 77 Dodger team was the best. And then he had one final chance in 81. And if you look at destiny, it was the strike year. And we win the first half by, a game. And we lose the first 2 games to Houston, come back. Lose the first 2 games to Montreal, come back. Lose the first 2 games to the Yankees, and then win 4 straight. So it was destiny then. That's why I talk about the picture back here of the 4 of us on the pitcher's mound 20 seconds after that final catch and winning our world championship finally. So, but in LA, I mean, look, we did pilots, all the time, and Merv Griffin shows and, Dance Fever, and I was on Fantasy Island and all these things.
Just getting started with Steve Garvey. Spoiler alert, Steve, we may or may not have a photo of you on Fantasy Island. I'll just put that out there for our viewers. After the great years in Los Angeles, there were 5 great years just south of that spot in San Diego, where Steve was responsible for still the most iconic moment in the franchise's history. We'll talk about the San Diego days and more with 10-time All-Star Steve Garvey coming up next on the MLB Network Podcast.
Worn by players like Michael Harris to meet the demand of elite ball players, the New Balance Fuel Cell 4040 V7 is a versatile cleat. The 4040 V7 is built for the athlete who needs responsiveness and ability to cut and run at their full speed. The model features a fuel cell foam underfoot and a synthetic and mesh upper to provide breathability, comfort, and a snug fit as you round the bases. The fuel cell midsole features nitrogen-infused foam specifically designed to propel athletes forward. Learn more and purchase the 4040 at newbalance.com.
Deep right field, way back, Cotto going back to the wall, it's gone! Home run Garvey, and there will be tomorrow!
Still gives you chills. Game 4 of the 1984 NLCS. Padres had fallen behind the Cubs 0-2. Steve Garvey's homer made a Game 5 possible where the Padres would make their first World Series appearance. Continuing with Steve Garvey today, I want to know, Steve, after the years in Los Angeles, what it was like when you were out there as a free agent. None of us who were fans in Southern California ever pictured you in a uniform other than that of Dodger blue. I know that there were Girl Scouts that were picketing Dodger Stadium for your return. True story. So take us back to that offseason and the decision you made to go play for the Padres.
Well, it had started to build the year before. It was the end of a 6-year contract, and I made a commitment to the Dodgers. And I always kept it, even though, when I signed for 6 years at $300,000 a year, it was a different time economically. It was a time when like I said, Al Campana signed us all, except for Davey Lopes through 82, and that was the core. That was the team that went to those 4 World Series. That laid the foundation for the history of the Dodgers. And then my contract was up after 82, but we had won that World Championship. It was so important. And it started to build in spring training, and the Dodgers didn't want to talk about it. And then my agent, Jerry Kapstein, and they said, well, we don't want distractions, because every place I went, it was about being a free agent. And then finally, at that time, I think you got from the end of the season to November 15th. And the Dodgers wanted 3 years at $1 million, and I knew parity for myself, the same as Brett and Schmidt and the guys, was about 1.4 for 5. So I knew it was my last contract. And I remember it was about 8:50 on the evening of November 15th. And we were at a law firm in downtown LA, and Mr. O'Malley, and the whole table was full. And we couldn't come together. And I always kid, they made me an offer I could refuse. My heart was deeply in LA, but my family, I thought, was the most important. And all of a sudden, the clock strikes 9, and strikes 12 on the East Coast, and I become a free agent. And that time was different. 5 teams could draft you to negotiate. So it was San Francisco, the Cubs, Yankees, Houston, and the Padres. And ultimately, it came down to San Diego. And I remember Ray Kroc, the famous owner and founder of the McDonald's, said, I want to talk to him in person. So we met at his clifftop house in La Jolla, and you could see LA one way and Mexico the other. And he had this little golf hat, little cigar, and he said, sit down, Stevie. And I sit down, and I go, yes, sir. And he says, I know what you could do on the field, son, but off the field, San Diego needs somebody that believes in charity and giving back, who could teach the fan what a veteran looks like. And he said, I got one problem. And I said, what's that, sir? He said, I can only pay in Big Macs and French fries. We laughed. And I said, well, can I have them for a lifetime? He goes, yeah, you can have them for a lifetime. He said, I could find a few more dollars in there. He said, but my son-in-law, Ballard Smith, is the president. Him and Jerry Kapstein, why don't we get this deal done by the next day? And it was done. I became a Padre.
Steve, I want to do this because the baseball accolades, the moments that you've had on the field, it's just too much for us to list. So I've just cherry-picked 5 moments/achievements to laundry list, and to have you talk about either ranking them 1 through 5 or a story that might come from 1 or 2 of them. So let's go through this together, and let's start with your MVP year in the National League in 1974. One of your greatest seasons on the field, and there were a lot of them, so that's the first moment that we can kick around. Second one is twice an All-Star Game MVP, and I remember vividly the second one because of the post-game celebration and your speech on the field. Twice, Steve was a NLCS MVP, had a monster series in '78, 4 homers against the Phillies, and then we just watched the big moment from the 1984 series, the homer against Lee Smith. So that's the third thing. Fourth thing, the consecutive game streak, which you already touched on. 1,207 consecutive games, still a National League record. And then your postseason exploits. You're a career .338 postseason hitter, and among players with at least 200 plate appearances, that's still a Major League record, better than Albert Pujols, Derek Jeter, the list goes on and on. In that group of accolades/moments, what is it you want to dig in on with me now?
The MVP, and how I, like we talked about, finding my position at first base. And then the next year, putting it all together and solidifying the infield, playing that first World Series game, but being the MVP in a very tight race with Brock and a few other guys in the fabulous season, and then to win it, spoke a lot about the beginning of who Steve Garvey was.
Time for another quick timeout. When we come back, another trip around the bases with former National League MVP and all-time great Steve Garvey. More than just baseball. Coming up next.
The Farmer's Dog thinks about your dog every day because their goal is to help them live a long, healthy life. Their food is developed by a team of board-certified vet nutritionists. Unlike most pet foods, the Farmer's Dog is made to human-grade standards. It's gently cooked without the ultra-processing and portioned for easy weight management. Because sure, good ingredients matter, but the best recipes call for so much more. Get 50% off your first box of the official pet food of Major League Baseball at thefarmersdog.com/MLB. That's thefarmersdog.com/MLB.
A little bit of time left with Steve Garvey on the MLB Network podcast. Steve, our production staff has dug through the annals of photos here to find 3 that we thought were really interesting that we can't wait to hear you speak on. You've talked about being a bat boy with the Dodgers and other teams in spring training before, and I would imagine seeing a photo of you as a young guy with Gil Hodges is still a very special thing.
Absolutely. That first day, it was, like I said, Hodges and Frillo and Snyder and Campanello. And, it was, I had taken out about 8 or 9 baseball cards the night before when my dad, Graham bus driver, said we were going to do this the next day. And it was a Jackie Robinson, these guys, and Reese. And Mom and Dad from New York. Mom was a Yankee fan. Dad was a Dodger fan. And I asked him, who's this and that? So he gave me a briefing. And that next day, we drive the bus on the tarmac, and off the K. O'Malley 1, the Dodger plane, comes these, iconic players. I always relate it to the Field of Dreams movie, where the players come out of the cornfield, but the Dodgers were coming off this iconic plane too. And that day, the bat boy for them was something so very, very special. But that laid the groundwork, and I got a chance to do it for 6 years, of teaching me what a professional player acted like and how they conducted themselves and how they played for the love of the game. So I was so very, very blessed to have that opportunity.
That's great.
And to have Gil, who was my idol, and to me, ultimately play first base. A lot of things are divine in life. When you look back and you look at my journey, that was the beginning.
You've already mentioned the celebrity appearance on Fantasy Island, so we have to back it up with a photo. Ricardo Montalban, is that Radar from MASH with Lasorda?
Yeah, isn't that something? I mean, can you imagine the Lasorda years? We always have celebrities around on the field, and and you talk about the celebrity aspect of playing in LA, but I remember Danny Kaye, the great actor and dancer, and Rickles and Cosby, and all these guys, Sinatra singing the national anthem on Tommy Lasorda's first day, opening day of '77. You never know who's going to come through, and we had to always be ready, because a couple times, you would end up, it was 5 minutes to 7, and the umpires are saying, "Where are you guys?" And you're listening to somebody telling stories. So, it was things like this, and like I said, doing the pilot of Dance Fever. Remember that one?
Sure. Wow.
And $1.98 beauty contest, and then being an extra on The Godfather, the second Godfather. We were playing baseball in Dominican Republic, and Lasorda was the manager, but Buckner and Peshorg and Valentine were wearing military uniforms. If you remember, the car blew up in what was supposed to be Havana. And then I was sitting in this restaurant when Pacino's telling Fredo he's exiled from the family.
Wow.
And I'm in the background there.
Okay, Steve, we have time now for the We Got Now question presented by New Balance. What player on the Dodgers, not named Shohei Ohtani, excites you the most right now?
Well, I mean, it's the best money a hedge fund could buy, so to speak, but very astutely put together by a world championship front office and ownership. And the player most like me, and not in terms of height now or looks, is that good-looking first baseman, Freddie Freeman, who I really like, who plays the game the way I played it. Could have played in the 70s very easy, wants to play that every game, makes contact, hits the ball the other way, plays an excellent first base, plays for the love of the game. And there are a lot of guys I admire on the team, and of course Shohei his enthusiasm is infectious, but Freddie probably is the most like me.
Got it. I'm only asking you this before we go because my wife put me up to it. She named her cat after you, by the way, so there's a little thing there. How are the forearms? Still jacked? You still doing a lot of...
Yeah, well, Matt, at 76, they're a little bit smaller now, but still, I'm not swinging that 35-ounce bat anymore. But and I'm getting a little shorter, but I always say I got a better strike zone. I can still go to right. So, and thank you very much.
Steve, it's been great having you on the podcast. What a pleasure for us. Thanks for the time. Thanks for watching this episode of the MLB Network Podcast presented by New Balance.